Everybody, welcome to La Lista, a LatinX writers podcast. I am your host, Ruben Mendive, and today we are joined virtually by a new guest this week. So I always start my episodes by asking my guests to introduce themselves, so your name and how you identify for the audience at home.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dany Flores. I am lesbian filmmaker from Ecuador. I am 24 years old, and I am based in Atlanta, Georgia. I identify as, I guess, a woman. My pronouns are she, her.
I like to ask people where they're from. So
Okay.
what's the short version? What's the long version?
So the short version is I'm from Cuenca, Ecuador. Long version. I lived there up until I was 17 years old, and then I moved here to the States to pursue my dream to becoming a filmmaker. Cuenca is the third biggest city in my country, but it doesn't really feel like it. You know, everybody knows each other. It's a very traditional town with a lot of culture. Everything is just absolutely beautiful. You know, the people, the food, the scenery, everything is just, it's just like a little magical town almost. I miss it every day, and I love it with all my heart, and I wish I could tell everybody everything about it, but we will be talking for like 10 to 12 hours if I get too much into it.
Can you tell us about your parents, their story, like how they came to be?
So my parents both, I'm going to tell you about my family first. We are a big family. It's four of us, four kids. I'm the oldest. And then I have two sisters and a brother. At some point, we got to 13 cats, 3 dogs, and my mom and dad. Like I said, we're a very traditional family, so my grandma was always around, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. There was not a single day that I can remember in my entire childhood that I wasn't surrounded by either a grandma, a grandpa, or somebody else in my extended family, which doesn't feel extended when you're a Latino. You probably understand. And my parents, they met when they were pretty young. My mom was 19, my dad was 21. My dad was a Casanova, dating all the girls in town until he met my mom, and then he always says that he absolutely completely fell in love with her. They dated for a few years before they got married. I think they got married when my mom was 24. My dad was like 26, I want to say, 25, 26. And then they had me a few years later. My dad actually proposed 3 times to my mom before she said yes. My mom always likes to say that because they had a really beautiful friendship before they started dating or anything. And my mom was the girl helping my dad buy presents for all the girlfriends that he had at the time, and tell him how to be cute to them and blah blah blah. And then eventually he was completely absolutely in love with her, so they decided to get married, and then they weren't gonna have kids, and then they compromised and had 4. And that's kind of their story. They have like a textile interior design store back in my country. Yeah, that's kind of what they do. They're still there with their business with my siblings.
So I don't know really anything about Ecuador.
Mhm.
So like, how would you describe it to someone that's ever been there? How was like it like growing up there?
It was beautiful. I remember my childhood every day almost. It's something that I don't see here. I moved here when I was 17. I was almost 18, and I actually had the opportunity to live with an American family for about 10 months as a foreign exchange student. And seeing how they grew up compared to what I did when I was growing up, it was completely different. People in Ecuador have the opportunity to come home for lunch, and we all sit as a family, and dinner is at 7 and we're all there, and we have a lot of family time compared to here when people really don't have that opportunity. Traditions are huge. Christmas is just a huge celebration. Everything just changes. And here is very similar, but in a more commercial way. There is a very Catholic country, so it's a more traditional way. You go to you go to church, and do this type of things. And my family, they're very very religious. I'm not. Um, but I grew up surrounded by that. I went to a Catholic school, so what you can expect if you go to my city is there's churches everywhere. We have like 50 churches probably all around my tiny tiny city. The food was a thing that always brought us together. Um, you will have people over for dinner all the time. Like my grandma was over for lunch every single day. Um, and getting together on Sundays to make parrilladas and just be together surrounded by food. I feel like it's a very special country in the sense that we have everything. Everything. We have beautiful beautiful beaches, and then we have the Amazon, and we have mountains, and we have insane animals that you don't see anywhere else in the world. And we have fruit that I've been looking for years here, that I grew up with having every single day and I can't find here. And it's just so weird that I'm not that far away. It's a 6-hour flight, but everything is just completely different here compared to there. And I'm not doing it justice because it's just there's so much to talk about. There's so much to explain about my country. The people are beautiful. The colors are beautiful. It feels like everything is more colorful there. Um, it's just a magical, beautiful place that I want everybody to go there at some point and have some cuy. That's something that we eat. It's guinea pig, and a lot of people don't know about this. But yes.
Interesting. No, I definitely want to go. So, I'm always curious about people during their like high school years, so like 14 to like 17. So I always frame this question with, who were you at that time? Who were you pretending to be? And how did other people see you?
I wasn't a cool kid. I'll tell you that right now. I went to an all girls Catholic school, and it was rough most of the time. I didn't really have many friends up until the point that I was like 12, 13 when I started hanging out with more people. But I was like a tiny adult because that's how my mom raised me. She didn't like kids. She didn't want any kids, and then she had four. And that's the reason why she raised us like tiny adults. She never talked to us like we were kids. So when I went to school, I was used to people talking to me like I was a grown up, and all the other kids wanted to go, do bad things and break the rules, and I was not having it. So no one really wants to hang out with the girl that wants to follow the rules and be good. So that's why it was really hard for me to, be a regular kid during my childhood years. But and when I was 12, 13, a different problem arose. All the girls around me were interested in, makeup and hair and boys and hanging out and going to parties and dressing up. And I was just not here for it. Like, you see me, my face is white, I don't wear any makeup. Up until I'm 24 years old, and I still don't care about any of that. And I was surrounded only by girls all the time. So it was just so difficult for me to try to connect with somebody else. And this is actually, the reason why I got into watching films and writing a lot more. And I'm sure you have questions about that later on, so I won't get super into it yet. But the feeling of loneliness that I experienced during those years, and not because I didn't have friends, but the friends I had we weren't connecting on the same thing. We didn't have the same priorities. So I just felt really, really lonely from the time I was 12 to the time I'm going to say 19. Just because even when I got here, I didn't know what I was looking for. I was looking for the same friendships and the same people that I surrounded myself by those early years. And I realized that even though I am still friends with them and I love them with all my heart, we weren't looking for the same things. So when I got here, I realized that I had to surround myself by people that were different than me. That was the only way that I was going to find what I was looking for.
So, you mentioned that you moved to the US when you were 17.
Mhm.
So, like, what sort of led up to that decision? How did you know that was something you wanted to do?
To get a little into it, when I was around 12, I started watching movies every day. I My friends will go out, they will go to parties, they will do all these things, and I wanted to do it too. But every time I did, I went out with them. I felt like I didn't fit in. I just felt like I was a weird little bug in the wall while everybody else was just beautiful, wearing makeup, wearing this beautiful clothes, and I was just wearing jeans and a shirt, you know? And I just hated doing that. So I started staying at home watching tons of movies. There were weeks that I would watch probably 30 movies, um, just because that made me forget about all of the things in my head. When you're 14, everything is a huge deal. Um, so all of those quote unquote problems that I had at the time will go away. For 2 hours, I could just surround myself and just immerse myself in a different world. I could literally travel to an alternative dimension, and it was just an amazing feeling. So when I was around 14, I decided that I wanted to do that. I wanted to be able to tell a story that was so powerful that it could literally make you feel things. I don't know how to explain this properly, but it's just a it's just like being a magician. You can make people feel things, and that is something that only music and movies and art can do, except for an actual human being person that is next to you, making you feel those things. Um, is just something that I really, really wanted to be able to do. I didn't want anybody to feel the same way that I was feeling. So I just wanted to go and tell stories that could potentially help another 14-year-old later on that was feeling the way that I was feeling. Um, and our film industry is not big. Ecuador doesn't really have a film industry. They're working on it. I know a lot of fantastic filmmakers from my country that are, put in the work for all of us to make sure there is something there for us to make a living out of. But at the time, there wasn't anything like it. A lot of Americans actually retire and move to Ecuador. So, and my parents speak English, both of them, which is not super rare now, but back then in 2006 to 2010, it was really, really weird. Nobody really spoke English. So a lot of Americans will come to my parents' business to buy mattresses, and they were moving there, so they needed to, furnish their house. And that's how I met Bill and Dean. And I was talking to them about it. They lived here their entire lives, and I was like, I want to make movies, and I don't know where to start. And they're like, why don't you move to the U.S.? They have the best film schools in the world. Um, I think that's a place for you to go. So they kind of put that bug in my head, and I couldn't stop thinking about it since. So they were kind of my first mentors into maybe this is what you should do. They didn't tell me, oh, you need to go to this school or you need to go to this place. They were just like, think about it. Here are some links. Read about going to school in the U.S. So that's kind of what I got into that path. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like talk about that journey. Like moving to like the U.S. at 17. Like what was that like? Did you have a plan? Did you know what you wanted to do?
The only plan I had, because I was 17 and I moved to Pennsylvania actually as a foreign exchange student. The only plan I had was I need to go there and I need to apply to every single school I can, because by the end of my exchange program, I need to have school to go to. So I moved here and I ended up living with this beautiful family, the Redgers. I still talk to them often, and they kind of guided me into living in the U.S. because I didn't have any clue. It was a tiny, tiny town called Bradford where I lived, and they taught me everything about living in the U.S. and applying to schools because I didn't have any clue. I knew that the SATs were a thing, but that's it. I didn't understand that I was really, really late to the process of applying to schools. Everybody applies to school when they're juniors. Seniors, they're a little late, and I was a super senior. I already graduated. I was doing school again. So all of that was really, it was a stressful, scary year because, I immersed myself in a different culture. I was living with a family that wasn't mine. that treated me like their own, but at the same time, I was used to having certain rules and they had something completely different. And I turned 18, I was an adult, I didn't want people telling me what to do. I wanted to go out with my friends, I wanted to be able to have a beer, and I couldn't because drinking legal age is 18 in my country, and then I come here and it's 21. And all of that was frustrating, and it was just so scary. But what kept me going was the fact that I had a plan. I was gonna make films and no one was gonna stop me. So even when I went to high school here, my counselors, my teachers, my film teacher in my high school, when I went to him to ask him to help me find good film schools, he said, maybe you should do business because film is not really something that you want to study. It's really hard to get into. And I was like, I'm not asking you if I should, I'm asking you to help me find places to go. So I just found someone else to help me, you know? Research, and I think sometimes they say that ignorance is a blessing. I think if I have known all the things that I know by now, back when I was 17, I wouldn't have done it. Because I literally packed one bag with a few jeans and a few shirts and, you know, a toothbrush, and I moved not knowing that 6 years later I was going to find myself where I am. I didn't know that racism was what it is. I didn't know sexism was an issue. I didn't know the film industry was mainly male and white. I didn't know that telling stories that speak to people like us are not necessarily stories that Hollywood wants to tell. I didn't know that people that seem to love me actually didn't. They just, you know, they were just there for certain reasons or for interests. You know, I didn't know how hard it was gonna be, and I didn't have a plan. I really didn't. I just went with everything, and I learned as I went, and I just was lucky to surround myself with people that wanted to help, that saw something in me and wanted to help.
Yeah. So, like, what were your parents thinking about this? You know, about your plan, you moving to a whole different country? Like, what was their thought process?
They were supportive. I, I always wanted to do really weird things. You know, when I was 5, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I would tell my parents, and there was always a but. You know, it was like, Mom, I want to be an astronaut. You're not tall enough. You need to eat your vegetables so you can be tall enough to be an astronaut. She never told me that I couldn't. She always told me that I needed to do something in order to do that. When I was 4, I wanted to be a top model because I would watch Top Model on TV, and she was like, "You need to be really tall to do that too. So you need to eat your vegetables." So when I was 12, I wanted to be a chef. She's like, "You can't even cook an egg. You need to go learn how to cook if you want to do that." And I was like, "Okay." And when I was 14, I come to them and I tell them I want to be a filmmaker. They're like, "Okay, sure. If when you're 16 and you still want this, we'll find a way to do it." 2 years later, I come back to them and I'm like, well, I'm 16 and I still want to be a filmmaker. I haven't changed my mind like I did all of those times back then. And they, even though it was hard for them, they supported me. My dad came with me when I was 16 to the US to tour schools. Back then, not knowing how expensive schools are in this country, because I was oblivious. You know, schools in my country are free. College is free, and public and private schools are about $2,000 to $5,000 a year. I had no clue that schools were that expensive, and my parents didn't either. So I think ignorance was good for them too, because if they have known how expensive it was, they wouldn't have let me even think about it. And the day that I was leaving, I was a mess. I was crying, and I was like, maybe I'm making a mistake. And my mom told me, well, you wanted me to support you, so now I'm supporting you, and you're getting in that plane. And we paid for this plane ticket. You're going. And my dad was a little more. He asked me not to come. He told me, if you stay, I'll buy you whatever car you want. I'll do whatever you want. Don't go. And I was like, I have to do this. I have to at least try. I don't want to stay here and wonder what if the rest of my life. I want to at least get in this plane, and if everything falls apart, I know I can come home. And he said, okay, I love you and I support you, and we'll see how we figure things out as we go. So yeah, I was lucky enough to have supportive parents. That even years later, when I tried to, you know, give up, they were like, "Sorry, you're too far into this to give up now. You're gonna come back, and in a week you're gonna want to be back there. And if you give up right now, there's nothing you can do to take it back." So they kind of supported me and kept me going, even when I just didn't want to keep going.
Yeah. And so, like, what'd you do after the exchange program?
So during the exchange program, I applied to about 8 different schools all over the country because I was here alone. I didn't have anybody or anything stopping me or keeping me in a place. I applied to Chicago, Atlanta, LA, Texas, looking at how much tuition was something that kind of put me back in the ground. I was like, okay, I have to make a decision based on money. At the time, I wasn't really, thinking about how I'm gonna pay for school. I just wanted to get into school. I didn't go to an international like school or anything like that. My school was like a normal, regular third world country school. So I didn't have any clue how hard and demanding, SATs and things like that were. Education is really, really good in my country. So when I moved here and I took the SATs, I realized that my level in math and English and all of that was really, really high. So that wasn't the problem, but the problem was to actually get into schools. Um, and then SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design, I got into SCAD and they offered me the most money. I got into USC, but they didn't offer me any money. So USC was my dream school. When I was 16, I went there and I toured the campus and I saw it and I was like, oh my God, this is where I want to be. This is it. This is the best film school. Spielberg is here. Everybody's here. But I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford SCAD on its own. But it was, when I talked to counselors at SCAD, they told me, after you're here for a year, you can apply for more scholarships. So I talked to my parents and I tell them, well, SCAD is about $18,000 a year after all my scholarships. Can we do this for a year? And after my dad, talked to a bank and we got a loan, they told me, you have enough for your first year at school. After this year, we don't know what we're going to do, but you got to figure it out. We don't have any money to keep you there. It's like, okay. So I committed myself to SCAD in Atlanta. I was going to go to Atlanta my first year because they didn't have the film program here yet. They had it in Savannah. And then my plan was to move to Savannah. Pack my bags again, moved from Pennsylvania, from the only 5 people I knew in this country, to a completely new city where I didn't know anybody. I never even been to Atlanta, ever. Got in the plane, got there, and somebody from my school actually picked me up from the airport because they have a lot of international students. So they're used to picking people up from the airport. I got to Atlanta from Ecuador at around 4 in the morning, and they brought me to my dorm. And I didn't even know where to go buy towels to take a shower because I never been to the city. And it's not like I moved from a city the same size, Cuenca, to a city the same size here. No, I moved from like a tiny, tiny town to one of the biggest cities in this country. And I was just lost. So I tell my roommate, I'm like, do you know where to go buy towels and, sheets for my bed? And then, I started Googling things. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have I didn't have the Wi-Fi password to just Google how to get to Target. But my roommate had been here for a little bit, so she was from Korea. So both of us not speaking English very well yet, just stumbling our way around this huge city. Which now I think back to it, it's like it was amazing. It was so freeing. It was just an experience that I probably never have again unless I move to a completely different country with a completely different language. And every single person that was at the dorm at the time was international. So we had people from Istanbul and China and Portugal and Colombia, and all of us kind of got together and started trying to figure this country out. That's kind of what took me to the city where I am now.
So how would you describe your time there at school? Like what do you think you gained from it? And was because you already talked a little bit about like the culture shock. So like what was your experience at the school?
Thankfully, SCAD is very international. So there were people from every single place in the world. They have students from 100 different countries. So I have met people from all over, which was awesome because we were all experiencing cultural shock at the same time. Together, even though it was different experiences, we were all going through the same thing. And I met a few people during my freshman year that are my friends up to this day, and I met a lot of people that I haven't talked to in like 4 years. I just graduated in November, so I'm still kind of fresh to the graduation and living my life without a school. But I had, since the day that I got here, I started working in films. I started as a PA and doing all those other things, just to get in this industry as fast as I could. But I think my experiences was amazing. I loved going to SCAD. I really did. You will hear mixed reviews of, I love it or I hate it, like everywhere else. But everybody was very helpful to me. I feel like I was under a lot of pressure all the time because I knew that my freshman year was my only secure year. After that, I had to figure out how to get money to go to school. Because, my parents, we're a middle class family in a third world country. My parents together probably make $20,000 a year. They don't have enough to keep me in a school here. So I was always under pressure. I was always working a job, 2-3 jobs at a time to be able to maintain myself, which everybody else that was surrounding me didn't have to do. They came from other countries having the money to just be here and do whatever they needed to do. I remember hearing the story of the student from China that would take a helicopter to the airport, private airport, to go to New York on the weekends because his dentist was there. And he will then come back to school by Monday. And I didn't have enough money to get an Uber to the grocery store. I had to walk and walk with my groceries bag. So I think that was the first time that I understood money, because I didn't know, $100 were the same as $1,000. And then I went to school and I had $20 for the week. And I was like, okay, I need to make this last. So that was one thing that I learned. Money and people, the different types of people that surround you and teach you new things, new perspectives, new cultures. I learned so much about sexuality and religion and cultures and experiences that it was just amazing. I became a completely different person after going to school for 4 years because I was lucky enough to surround myself with people of every single background. It made my experience as a writer and as a creator and as a person so much more valuable than if I have stayed in the same place where I was born my whole life. And I understand that I'm coming from a place of privilege because not a lot of people have enough money to buy a plane ticket and come to the United States. So I am very grateful that I had the opportunity to do this, and this is why I want to work towards being able to give this opportunity to a lot of people. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but this is something that I want to do. I did so many weird, random stuff during school because I had to, figure out a way to stay in school. I became a professional cyclist because my second year, they were starting the cycling team, the collegiate cycling team in my school, and that was my only way to get a full ride for the second year of school. So I started training 4 to 6 hours a day, plus working a job, plus going to school full time to become a cyclist. The cycling team realized that I wasn't really a good cyclist, so they were like, yeah, we're going to keep you in the team, but we can't give you money for your junior year. So I had to go figure out something else to do. So I joined the drumline, and the drumline came with a really good scholarship. So I was like, okay, hi guys, I'm going to learn how to play an instrument. So I learned how to play the cymbals, which was the cheapest, easiest instrument to learn. And everybody in the drumline was kind enough to, not not notice that I was terrible at it because they all knew the story. They all knew that I was here on nothing. I had friends that bought me food when I couldn't afford food, or that stole food from the cafeteria at the school to kind of give me a piece of pizza when I didn't have any money to buy food. Um, I had friends that offered me their places to stay when I was about to lose my apartment because I didn't know how I was going to pay for rent. So I was, again, lucky to surround myself with people that cared about me so much. My senior year, I couldn't find a way to, wiggle myself into a team or an activity that could give me money. So I got a job in a restaurant. I I can't smell. I don't have a sense of smell, so I can't really cook. But I got a job as a line cook, and when the chef was teaching me, it was like, "Oh, can you taste this? Tell me if it's good." And this is delicious, but I couldn't really taste it. So I worked there for about 9 months, figuring it out, paying for school, seeing what I could do to be able to stay, and I graduated. So I, I still don't know where I got all the strength that I needed to do all of that. Like I told you, if I had known how hard it was gonna be, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, no, and the funny thing is like those are all movies. Like a kid that joins the drum line, a kid that joins the cycling team. Like these, I could see all these movies on Netflix. Honestly, I've also like I've never been to Atlanta. It's on my list, but there are a lot of productions down there. So
Yes.
so I am interested about that aspect. Like, were you able to like sort of tap into that as a film student and just professionally to be like in this place where the industry is?
Yes. So that's actually the reason why I decided to stay in Atlanta instead of going to Savannah. Because SCAD has campuses all over the world, and I was like, well, I'm already in a different country, so I'm gonna kind of stick around where I know my way around, the grocery store and stuff. I don't want to have to learn it all over again. And they opened the film program here in Atlanta, so I was like, okay, definitely staying here my 4 years. Um, so Atlanta right now has the most productions, including New York and LA. We have more movies filming here. Well, not right now, but when COVID is not something that you have to take under consideration, we have the most productions here in the city. I was able to get my first professional job in the actual industry in my junior year. It was early my junior year. I got to work on the film Stuber as an office PA. I got that job, and I never really worked in the industry like that because I've been a PA on like really tiny indie films. I was a producer at the time. I was producing short films. I was an AD, for productions 20 to 40 people. So I had been working actively in film, but never in a 20th Century Fox film. So when I got there and I saw they had Craft for Crafty, I was just starstruck. Dave Bautista was right there down the hallway from where I was sitting at my desk, and I was just a tiny kid from a tiny country in South America that was here now. It was almost like out of body experience. I always tell people that celebrities are not real for us because they don't exist in the same place that we exist. So you see, Brad Pitt as almost like a TV show character because you're never gonna be in the same room as him. But people here do. Sometimes they do because you go to the grocery store and he's walking around at the grocery store and you see him. That's not a reality for us. When I came here and that was happening to me, it was just so weird. Thanks to the people that I met during Stuber, I was able to get a job on a Netflix show. I got into Stuber really, really late. They were already on like day 22 of like 26, 27 of shooting. So I was only going to be there for about a month, and I knew that. And then we were at a studio here in Atlanta, which is not in Atlanta, it's in one of the cities that is really close to Atlanta, is Chambly. And we were in office number 3. Office number 1 was empty, and someone was moving into office number 1. my boss at the time asked me, hey, can you go to office number 1 and ask them if they want the lamps that we're about to throw away, because when you wrap the production, everything goes. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I go to production number 1 and the office number 1, and I'm like, hey, not knowing who these people are. Hey, I'm from office 3. Do you guys want some lamps that we're about to throw away? I'm the office PA. And they're like, yeah, we'll go over there to take a look at them. They come, they look at the lamps, they love them, they want them, and they're like, oh, we'll come get them in a few hours. We're busy right now. And I'm like, oh, I can bring them to you guys. They're like, no, you don't have to. I'm like, yes, no worries. When I have a second, I'll bring the lamps to you. So I put them all in the cart. I bring them a few hours later, put them down, ask them where exactly they would like them. And what happened to be the producer for the whole show was there that day. And he liked me. So the coordinator, like, when are you done with that show? I was like, Friday's my last day. This was a Thursday. Tomorrow's my last day. You want to stay here Monday? We really like you. You're really helpful. We would love to have you start with us. So I was like, yeah, sure. On Monday, I had another job, which was insane to me, that I just, these people, because I brought some lamps to them, they hired me. They love me. David Grace is one of the UPM on that show, which happened to produce Honey Boy last year. So I was just, it was insane that he was there, and I got to learn so much from him, and we still talk. I still contact him, ask him how he is. It was just my birthday last week. He said happy birthday to me. We have, even though I work with him only for about a month, we have a relationship because they saw how helpful and how willing I was to do anything they needed. So that's one thing that I kept with me. Just working hard and wanting to do your job will open doors for you, even when there doesn't seem like there's a door there. The same coordinator on my first job contacted me a few weeks later, and he was like, I have a show starting in 2 weeks. Can you work? And because of visas, and I was here on a student visa, I could only work if it was an internship, consider an internship. I tell him, yes, but there's a lot of loopholes that you have to jump in order to hire me. Do you really want to go through this? Send me everything that you need from me. I want you on the show. So that I jumped from being an office PA from one show to another for almost 7 months in a row, with people on, this third show that I did was a Paramount show, making exceptions for me to hire me because, I was a tiny office PA. The lowest of the lowest positions in the industry that you can have, and not lowest in like you're not valuable, but like literally the most starting position that there is, and they were making exceptions for me, and I was not used to that. It's like, why are you guys not hiring somebody else? It's easy to find an office PA. There's so many people out there that are more than capable to print some papers. They told me, like, you have something that not a lot of people do. You work harder. Dennis was the name of the coordinator on my first show and my third show. And he told me, you work harder than my other two PAs together. Going and jumping a few loopholes for you is not hard because you work harder than anybody that I have met. And I realize that I'm, talking highly about myself a little too much. My mom will be really disappointed. But just to whoever hears this, I'm saying this because people will give you a hand if they see how hard you're working. I believe that that's possible. That's why I'm saying all of this. Currently, I am, I'm an indie producer, and I produce a bunch of smaller short films. I'm currently working on moving into longer films, but I'm also a producer's assistant. That's what I do during the day, and at night I produce my own things. So I'm still in the industry here because there's so much opportunities to meet people that could potentially open doors for you. So I do kind of both. To answer your question, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing that I'm curious about for Atlanta. Like, how would you describe like the indie film scene down there?
It's huge. Oh man, there's so much here. And the indie filmmakers here are trying to get more people because everybody goes to LA. You know, all the writers, the place to start is LA. All the actors, the place to start is LA. And we have so much content here to be shot and so many fantastic talented people, but we don't have enough actors because everybody's in LA. We don't have enough, content. And you know that it's easy to send a script somewhere else and we just make it here. But because everybody's so used to going to LA, Atlanta for a few years was struggling because we didn't have enough people to work in the industry. I know so many talented, amazing people that are just trying to make Atlanta happen. We're trying to make it Hollywood here because we are Hollywood. We just happen to be used as the production side, and everything pre-production and post-production happens in LA still. I'm a producer, and even though I have done 20-minute films, I struggled to find content, especially Latin content, to produce. In the last 6 months, I have reached out to probably 60 to 100 people, screenwriters. They're like, oh yeah, we'll send you something. I'll send you something. Or they simply don't reply, or they don't have any short films, or something happens, they don't have anything ready. It's so hard for me to find content. So I hope this helps me find somebody that has something for me to produce, because I can't pay you for your story, but I'll make your film for you. So it's not really a fair trade, but if it goes somewhere, we both can benefit from it. I'm not going to charge you to make it, but I can't pay you for it. And the one thing that I do love about the industry here is that everybody's willing to work for free. I have been on probably more than 100 sets, and 60 of them have been for free, because all my free shows, all my free productions that I've done, I have met at least one person that has gotten me a paid show later on, or a friend, or a mentor, or someone to read my scripts and give me some feedback. Every single time, even if the crafty sucks, even if the lunch is late, even if we stay 20 hours there, I have always met somebody that is worth being there for. So whenever someone asks me, hey, can you AD for me? Is a 2-day shoot, not paid? Absolutely. If I am available and I have nothing else to do, I'll be there, because I want you to succeed as a filmmaker, and you are by default helping me succeed as a filmmaker by getting experience. I'm always there to help. And everybody here, I think, feels the same way.
So I am curious of where the writing came in for you. When did you feel like writing was something you wanted to do, you were doing, and something you wanted to pursue more professionally?
I started writing really early, and not like scripts that were like beautifully written and amazing. I started writing like children stories because I was a child. I was about 6 years old, and my mom actually is the one that kind of introduced me to writing and reading. I will read so much. She will take me to the bookstore all the time and let me pick 1 or 2 books. And because of that, I learned how to start writing. I will write a lot about animals because I love animals. I will write stories about like little dogs and whatever. And then later on, I started writing more and more. I was a normal teenager in the sense that I was obsessed with Twilight and Harry Potter, and then later on the Hunger Games. But I think Twilight was my first introduction to a fantastic, like, fictitious world inside of a real world, which was not that I write stories like Twilight, but it was my first introduction to there is a fantastic element in the regular world, but only select people get to know about it. And I love that idea. So when I was about 13, 14, I started writing a lot. I have actually never talked about this because I was very embarrassed that I was a writer. I was like, this is not something that I want people to know about me. This is like Batman, this is my secret identity. I don't want anybody to know that I write, because I didn't want people to pressure me into proving something. By the time I was 14, I had written And again, this was not good writing, but for a 14-year-old, it was kind of impressive. I had 4 books inside of the same world, all of them like 200 pages. So I spent hours and hours and hours after school just writing, even though it was not good. I was writing. And they tell you that you need to do, what is it, 10,000 hours to become a professional in something. I have done a lot more than that, but I don't consider myself even close to being a decent writer. I'm still working on it. Um, and I never let anybody read that because I was really, really embarrassed. I was like, this is something that I don't want people to know. Like, I need to whisper and go hide when I go write. I will literally hide to write because I was so embarrassed by it. Um, and it took me a long time to be able to admit that I was a writer. Um, I think watching movies helped me understand the hero's journey and things that I eventually put names to when I went to college. Um, but initially, I didn't know. I was like, oh, there's the introduction, there's like the body of the film, and then there's the conclusion of the film, and there's the first, second, and third act. Um, and by watching more movies, I understood that there was a structure. By watching TV shows, I understood that that was completely different. And you write TV shows, so you know how much different it is to write one of those than writing a movie, than writing a short story, than writing a book, or writing just a little short story, you know? Um, so there were different things that introduced me to different types of writing.
And, I saw that you recently made a short film that you wrote and directed. So, like, can you sort of talk to us about the film and how it came to be?
So the title of the film is Vanilla Milkshake. And I started writing Vanilla Milkshake when I was, I think, 20. It was a story that I really wanted to tell, but I wasn't sure how to tell. And it started as a fictional world. I knew the fictional part of it, but I didn't know the characters that were going to be part of this story. Um, it was all about this token is a device, like a bracelet. Um, and what it does is the closest you get to your soulmate, the warmer it gets. It just warms up. But I didn't know the type of story that I wanted to tell. And when I was about 19, you know, 18 to 21, I was really struggling with my identity. I was like, am I gay? Am I bi? Am I, what is happening here? Why don't I like boys? Maybe I do like them. No, you know what? No, they're kind of gross. you know, so I was going through a lot in my personal life. And initially, my story of Vanilla Milkshake was about this girl and this guy that, met at a coffee shop. And it was just a romantic little tiny story. I'm a hopeless romantic that happens to like fiction. So it's a really weird mix. And every time I would pitch a story, people loved the idea of the token. But they were like, yeah, but the characters are kind of meh. I was like, okay. And I went through probably 30 different drafts to get to where the story is now. And I gave up on it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something else. This sucks. I'm going to go write a story about a stand-up comedian. And I literally started writing a story about a stand-up comedian and blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, you know what? I have to do this. I have to do it. I was 22. And by then I knew I was a lesbian. And I knew that I was confident in my own skin. And I knew that I could pull off a script that was only 10 pages. Like, I can do this. I can. It's easy. I have the tools. I have the equipment. I'm going to make this film. I was lucky enough to be surrounded with people that supported my vision and believed in me because I didn't. I was like, I can't do this. Who am I kidding? I'm not a director. And every director that I went to that is a close friend of mine, and I asked them to direct this story, they were like, listen, I can, but I don't want to. This is something that you have to do because this is a story that is so personal to you that I'm not going to do it justice. I made the story queer. I think that was the element that was missing because it was a story about this girl falling in love with a man initially and then kind of realizing that, you know what, this doesn't feel right. So I was able to tell the story in a way that, and without giving a lot of it, away, in a way that it related to the journey that I went through 3-4 years of my life in a 10-minute story, which was really, really, really hard to do. um, but because it's such a personal story, it's been more than a year that we have working on it, from raising the money to make it to post-production. We actually just finished music last week, but we have been submitting it to film festivals, letting people know, hey, the music there is not the finished piece. We finished it last week, and I am so proud of it. I'm so proud of it. Everything that I wanted is there, and we made some mistakes, but and it was my first time directing something. It was my first time as the main writer. It was such a scary experience, but it was so beautiful because I had such a support system with me that just made me take this story and tell it in a way that makes it justice to my story and what I wanted to tell.
So, I am curious, because I'm an immigrant, you're an immigrant. So I'm just curious of like the visa situation as it stands now, because I know there might be people out there who are relating to this, and there might also be people that don't really understand what this is all about. So like, sort of where are you now in that path,
I've been through so many type of visas. There's a tourist visa that I had at some point when I first came here. Then I had an F1, which is exchange program type visa that is only good for a year. And then I had an F1, which is, a higher education visa. So if you go to college or anything like that. And then I also had an CPT, which is a type of permit that you can only get if you are a student in college doing an internship. It's very, very specific, because when you are on an F1, you cannot work unless you work at school. So when my CTP, I was able to do all the shows that I talked about. I am on OPT, which is optional training program, which they give to every student that graduates from an American school, and they are able to stay here for a year. There are extensions to that. There's a STEM extension that allows people to stay for an extra 2 to 5 years. But eventually it all ends. All of this type of visas are non-permanent visas. Like you're basically telling the government that you are not looking to stay here permanently, which is a lie for most people, but that's what legally the paper says.
Yeah.
In order to stay here full time, after your OPT, you need to find an H-1B. H-1B is a type of visa that a company will sponsor for you. So if they like you, they want to keep you full time, they will do that for you. An H-1B is from $8,000 to $15,000. That doesn't come out of your pocket; it comes out of your company's pocket. But in order for the company to be able to say that they want to do that for you, they have to first prove that they looked in a pool of applicants in this whole country, and they couldn't find a person that had the same qualifications as you, so that's hard. And they also have to offer you a higher pay than they would anybody else here, because your qualifications are so fantastic. The problem with that is that in the current administration that we're under, they cancel all of those. So there is really, until December 31st, they're all postponed. So you cannot apply for one right now. In the film industry, there's a specific type of visa that you can get. It's called an O visa, or a visa for extraordinary abilities. This is what I'm currently going after. If you are an actor, a producer, a director, a writer, you can apply for this visa. In order for you to qualify for this, though, there's a lot of loopholes. It's a visa that can be good for, months to up to 3 years. That's the longest you can get it for. You need to prove to the government that you have enough projects for the next months to 3 years to stay in this country, which I do. You need to have press on yourself. People need to be talking about you. You need to be recognized nationally and potentially internationally for you to be able to prove that you are actually an extraordinary person. That's what is called an extraordinary visa. You need to have credits showing that you are actually the person that you say you are. So I am a producer and I'm trying to stay here on an O visa as a producer. I need to have enough credits to support that. I need to have enough awards that support that I am a producer. So all of that, it's a big, big application. And it's just a hard thing to do and get. It is, you have to pay for lawyer fees, you need to pay for visa fees, which is not terrible. This is actually the cheapest visa there is compared to an H-1B, which will be about $15,000 for your employer. This one comes out of your pocket and is about $400, which is still a lot of money, but is a lot less. So this is where I am right now. My current visa expires in January, and then I am, trying to figure out what the best way to move forward is for me. Because money-wise, there's a big difference between all these other options. I know people that have gone to school again, to maintain their status and stay here. That's not an option for me. I barely got my first degree, so I can't really go back to school, even though I would love to get a master's. Maybe someday. But there's different processes and different ways, so it makes me very, very angry where people tell you, "Oh, just come here legally. It's so easy." No, it's not. It's absolutely not easy to come here legally, which I did because I had the opportunity to, have enough money to pay for these fees and pay for a plane ticket and go to the embassy and do the interview and do all of these things. But a lot of people can't afford that. It should be more common knowledge how hard it is to just get one little visa, and it's usually just a temporary one, because getting a permanent one there's very specific categories for you to fill to be able to get in there. But fingers crossed, we'll figure it out, right?
Yeah. And just to sort of start wrapping up, I'm always curious of like my guests who they're fans of. So who are the writers and that are heroes of yours, friends, peers? I always frame it as like people you're creeping on Instagram. They don't know who you are, but you love their work. And you're just
Yep.
love what they're doing.
The person that I have been creeping on the most right now is Gloria Calderon Kellett.
Mm-hmm.
One Day at a Time. I don't know if you know this show. She's from Puerto Rico, and she's just amazing. I love One Day at a Time. I don't know if you've seen it. It was the first 2 seasons are on Netflix. The last one I haven't been able to find, but I know it's out. And they went through this whole thing because Netflix decided not to renew them for a 3rd season, and then she figured out a way to find a new home for it. And it was just so inspiring. People keep telling her no, and she was like, "You know what? Fuck you. I'm gonna go do my own thing and find a home for this beautiful story that I'm telling somewhere else." And not to give anybody spoilers, it's been out for more than 2 years. But one of the main characters is a lesbian woman. And I never seen a Latin lesbian woman on the screen. And she went through the same thing that I've been going through, telling her parents or her mom or her grandma that she's gay, and them having the whole religion part and tradition part that tells them this is not okay in their brain, and then all of them coming through stronger on the other side together. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful story. And this on Twitter, she's super, super active, and she does threads all the time about queer screenwriters or screenwriters of color, different types of people, so her assistant can go through them and possibly help them find them an agent. She's always trying to find people that are underrepresented and represent them some way. So I just admire her so much, and I hope I get to work with her at some point. 2 filmmakers that I love that are not super active on social media, but I always, if I see their name, I try to see what they're up to and what they're doing. Dany Armida She's an Ecuadorian filmmaker, actually from the same city I am from, and she put out the first film that I remember hearing so much about. It was about 2008, 2006, 2008 that the film came out. Que tan lejos is the film, and it was my first experience with Ecuadorian filmmaking that I had. So it was very, very interesting, and the fact that she's a woman, she made me realize that by being a woman from Ecuador, I could still be a filmmaker. There was nothing stopping me. And then a good friend of mine, I will call him a good friend. We haven't talked in a little bit, but we known each other for a while. Eric Francisco Medina, that's his name. He's from Puerto Rico as well, and he is all about writing Latin stories. I know of a lot of Latin writers that are not necessarily trying to focus on writing Latin stories, but he's one of them. And it's just so inspiring to me that he is sticking to his roots in a way that it's just, again, inspiring to me. We went to SCAD together, and he just graduated a little bit ago. He has a production company with another good friend of mine, Mahalia La Tortu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name properly, but Mahalia is from Haiti, and the both of them work together, write together. They're awesome.
This is the social media part. So where can people find you on social media?
Yes, so they can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Dany, Dany, Flores is Flores 96, because I was born in 96. Yeah. And they can also find my website is danyflores.com. They can find me on Twitter, is the same name.
And so I like to have my guests title the episode. So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer. And in that blank, you can put as many words as you want. You can mix them all around. Just whatever feels true to you, the type of writer you are, who you are as a person. I use this as a tool so people can find community. So when they see your title, they can be like, oh, that's like me. Like, let me listen to this. Let me reach out to this person.
I'm going to say queer, because I think that's, in my experience, that's been the hardest thing to find, queer Latin filmmakers. So that's what I'm going to say. That's my answer.
Perfect. So now put out the bat signal and people can come and find you.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was such a fun interview. I'm excited for everyone to meet you and collab and